Let us learn a sikha together. Haazinu, Chelek Yudalit Sikha Beis. It's a complicated sikha in the fact that it has many, many layers, and I'm just going to try to summarize it so that we can just try to get to the nakuda, to the point of the sikha. Obviously, there's many different ways of unpacking the sikha. This is just one way. I've spent quite a bit of time on the sikha. It's quite a journey to actually make sense of where it's going. I hope I could offer some clarity. So the Gemara tells us, and that's really the connection to this week's parsha. At the beginning of Haazinu, the Torah uses the words Kishem Hashem Ekta Havu Gadol Elokeinu. I call the name of Hashem, bring greatness to Hashem. From there, the Gemara learns Minayin Limmud HaTorah. How do you know that you have to make a brocho? Shekichamim says Utzivanu al divrei Torah before you learn from this. Why? Because the pasuk tells you Kishem Hashem Ekta. When I call out the name of Hashem, in other words, when I am learning Hashem's Torah, I have to bring greatness to Hashem. In other words, I have to make a bracha. Now, the fact that the Gemara in Maseches Brachos, that's where the learning is, that's where the drash is. The fact that the Gemara needs to find a special limud, a special source, to tell us that you have to make a bracha on Torah, even though it should be just like any other mitzvah. You don't need a special limud that you make a bracha on a sukkah or a lulav or a Rosh Hashanah, etc. The mitzvahs, the brachas are there. So why do you need a special limud, a special source to make a bracha on Torah? From there you learn that the birchas of Torah is different. Comes the Rabbi at the beginning of the sikha and says that you could say that the difference between Torah and other mitzvahs is that every other mitzvah you're thanking Hashem for the fact that Asher kitshanu b'mitzvaysav, that Hashem made us holy through the mitzvahs. This mitzvah is a means to make us holy. However, in Torah, even though it's taka you say Asher kitshanu b'mitzvaysav, nevertheless the mitzvah is, the bracha is on the actual Limmud HaTorah. It's not the fact that Limmud HaTorah is a means to an end, but rather just on the mere fact that I could learn Torah. And the Rebbe brings a source from the Alter Rebbe and the Shulchan Aruch who says, "V'lachein yira kol adam shtiya kli chemdasai shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, shehaya mishtasheh ba b'chol yom." A person should find that the thing that Hashem loves, that Hashem plays with all day, which is Torah, a person should find it and consider it something more pleasurable and more beautiful than any other pleasure in the world. In other words, over here, it's not that Torah is a means to an end, that through Torah you achieve Asher Kitshanu b'mitzvaysav. No, I'm just blessing on the mere fact that I'm learning Torah. Just like on Birchas Hanenin, for example, you make a bracha on a cup of water, you don't make Asher Kitshanu b'mitzvaysav, but rather you say, just on the simple pleasure of the water or whatever you're eating. Now, based on that the bracha that you make on Torah is not on the Torah, what it does to you, but rather the simple fact of learning Torah. Based on that, the Rebbe comes to a question. And by the way, this sikha is connected to another sikha, I believe, that we learned in Parshas V'eschanan, Chelek Yudalid, and it was actually from the same Farbrengens. So like the same Farbrengen that the Rebbe took, it's split up into two different sikhas on the obligation of women in Torah. Maybe it was Akev, the obligation of women in Torah that we learned earlier, and this sikha are very much interconnected. So the Alter Rebbe writes that the women make a bracha or birchas HaTorah, and he gives a reason for it. Why do they have to make the bracha? They need to learn the mitzvahs and know how to do it, and they have to know how to be cautious about not transgressing any loisaseh, which they have the same obligation of not transgressing a loisaseh like a male. Now, if we just said that the bracha of Torah is not because of the chiyuv ha-mitzvah, in other words, it's not because Asher Kitshanu b'mitzvaysav, and therefore it's not that Torah does anything that it obligates me, that it makes me holy. It's simple on the fact of learning Torah. then why does the Alter Rebbe need to come up with a reason that women need a reason to learn to make the Birchas HaTorah? Just say no. They also, they also have the geschmack of Limmud HaTorah, and they also have this, beautiful connection to it and this pleasure that we said of it, and therefore that's why they make the bracha, not because of that they're chayav. Again, we said that Birchas HaTorah has nothing to do with the Kishanim Mitzvot and the chiyuv. So to unpack that, the Rebbe goes in an entirely different direction. So let's leave that on the side. And let's discuss why on the mitzvah of Limmud HaTorah do we only have to make a bracha once a day? If we're comparing it to, let's say, a cup of water. Each time I have a cup of water, if it's in a separate time, obviously if it's in the same meal, I don't have to make another bracha. But, each hour I'm having a cup of water, each hour I'm going to make a bracha. Why? By Limmud HaTorah, do you only make the bracha once? And the Alter Rebbe writes that a person who goes, who goes to make a living, they still don't have to make another bracha on the learning when they come back and learn. Even if you go and have a little nap, you don't have to make another bracha. The only time you have to make another bracha on Limmud HaTorah is when you have a shinas keva, a full-on shlaf, which, by the way, is interesting. That's not a halacha that people often think of. If you, let's say, you didn't stay up, you stayed up the whole night learning Torah, obviously, and you then want to, you have a good gesunte shlaf, not a nap, you go to sleep, then technically you have to make Birchas HaTorah all over again. Now the question is, why by Tefillin? If you took off your Tefillin and you then went to the bathroom, etc., you have to make a bracha again. Why, however, by Birchas HaTorah, don't you have to make a bracha? Unless you went full on sleep. So the Rebbe says that in order to understand that, you see something unique about Tefillin. So again, that's why we have to hold the sikha. I was listening to various other shiurim on the sikha and just trying to hold my head. So hopefully I can help you do that because I was losing it. Stage 1, woman. Kohen Gadol. Stage 2, Torah is a mitzvah all day and yet you only have the obligation once. Stage 3, unpack something unique about Tefillin, and that is that Tefillin, you're not allowed to have hesech hadas. What is the definition of hesech hadas? Says the Alter Rebbe, Einay nikra hesech hadas, elok she'omed b'schoike kalos reish, when you're standing and you're being irreverent and frivolous and just, totally easy, not serious. Now, we know that the prohibition, the foundation of the prohibition of not being Mesiach Das comes from the Tzitz. That the Kohen Gadol had a Tzitz on his head and he was never allowed to lose focus on it. So by the Tzitz, it was a much stricter obligation on not losing focus. So why, by Tefillin, is it considered losing focus only when you're being irreverent? But if you're just standing and not focusing on Tefillin, it's not considered hesech hadas, unlike Tzitz, that you have to think about it all the time. And the Rebbe says like this. Tefillin has 2 points. Now, let me just, again, take a pause. We have to understand now that there's many different levels of losing focus. There is what we spoke about, Torah. We spoke about Tefillin, and now we're speaking about Tzitz. So first we're going to understand the difference between Tefillin and Tzitz. Then we're going to understand Tefillin and Torah. Then we're going to understand why Torah, you only have to make a bracha once. And then we're going to understand, hopefully, why women, the Alter Rebbe needs to come up with a specific reason and cannot use the same reason that, Torah is an end on itself, to obligate them with the Birchas HaTorah. So to understand Tefillin and the difference between Tefillin and Tzitz, Tefillin has 2 points. What's the 2 points of tefillin? It has, number one, the idea of simply putting on tefillin, and the other one is the obligation, the kavanah of l'shabed hamayach v'alev. Now, as long as the tefillin are on you, the hanachas tefillin is there. So therefore, you made the bracha, the tefillin is still on you. So even though you were mesiach das, the hanachas tefillin is still there. However, when you take off your tefillin, then you have to make another bracha, unless you were thinking about it the whole time, because now you were lacking both elements. You didn't have the shibud hamayach v'alev, and you didn't have the hanachas tefillin on you. But if you had one of them, that means you're daiti alein, you were thinking about it while the tefillin was off. So at least as long as you had one of the two things, that's okay. So basically with tefillin, there's 2 points, and as long as you have one of them, you're okay. Now, you might ask, why is one of them okay? If I put on the tefillin, but I'm supposed to also have the kavanah. So why is it okay if I don't have the kavanah later? Because you had the kavanah at the beginning. When you put on the tefillin, you had kavanah. And therefore, the kavanah pulls itself as long as you're wearing the tefillin, it connects to it. Just like you find that like when you have to do something lishma, with the right intention, for example, writing a get, the main thing is to do it at the beginning. It's good enough if a person says at the beginning of the writing of the get, I'm writing for the sake of the get, or if you're writing Sefer Torah, L'Shem Sefer Torah, you don't have to think about it the whole time. And so too with tefillin. Tzitz, however, because its whole point of the tzitz is to atone for the blood and the chelev, etc., all the karbanis that you have at a specific time. Therefore, you have to be mindful every single moment, because each time it's a different carbon, and you always have to be mindful. So tefillin, as long as you had the mindfulness at the beginning, when you wear the tefillin, it's all good. However, when you're being frivolous, the problem is, even though the tefillin technically are still on you, so you have one of them, the issue is that this is negating. There is 3 levels in tefillin. There's focusing on tefillin, there's not focusing on anything, or just focusing on something else, but that's not negating. And then there's something that's negating shibud halev. And because this is negating shibud halev, which you had when you put on tefillin, that removes even the fact that you're wearing tefillin, and that's considered hesech hadas. So the highest level is tzitz, and then the next level is tefillin. Now, back to Limmud HaTorah. Alter Rebbe brings two opinions, whether you can have a break between making the bracha on Torah and learning. One opinion says that it's fine, and the other opinion says it's not fine. The Rebbe says because there's a principle not to add machlokes, we might say that the second opinion agrees with the first opinion in the fact that that Talmud Torah is a chiyuv tamid, and therefore it's not the end of the world if you're not learning the whole day. However, they just say that you have to make sure to learn the second at the beginning, that you have to learn, but they don't negate the fundamental principle that Torah is a chiyuv all the time, and therefore you always have a shaychus to the Torah. So based on the fact of what we said on tefillin, that when you put on the tefillin and you have just one hanachas tefillin, it lasts, even if you had the kavanah at the beginning. So too, as long as you made the bracha birchas HaTorah at the beginning, whether according to one opinion you had to learn right away, the other opinion you didn't have to learn right away. The point is that the principle is that you had your da'as on the Torah, therefore the whole time you have it with you. Unlike tefillin that you take off so then you no longer have hanachas tefillin, Torah you don't have, it's not a physical thing. You have the Torah with you because the chiyuv is on you constantly, but only there's like a lion that's forcing you not to learn because you're at work, or you're in the bath, etc. So you have, just like you have the tefillin with you all day, you have the Torah with you all day. However, if a person goes to sleep for real, or somebody who b'chlal is not learning, that's a true hesach hadas. That is a hefsek, and according to at least one opinion, they have to go and make a bracha again. So now we understand that Torah is a lower level in its obligation because it doesn't have the physical tefillin. It's similar to tefillin, but ultimately it's with you the whole day, and therefore you only have to make a bracha once. Now we could understand why you need a special reason for the fact that women make the birchas HaTorah, that they are obligated to learn their mitzvahs. Why? Because if not this explanation, we would say that even though a woman make a bracha for the introduction of their learning, nevertheless, you would think that each time that they learn, it's a separate mitzvah. They don't have the chiyuv tmidi on it. They don't have the constant mitzvah, and therefore each time they have to make their own bracha. Comes the Alter Rebbe and says that I'm telling you why they have to make a bracha once. He's not going to tell you why they have to make a bracha, period. He's telling you why they only have to make a bracha once. Just like men have to make a bracha once because they have a constant chiyuv, so do women have a constant chiyuv. Leida Allah shalom. So in other words, the Alter Rebbe is coming and telling you, with the women, he's coming and telling you why they only have to make the bracha once. That's really what the Sikha is coming and unpacking with us. Because remember, the question was, why does he have to give a reason for Nashim Mavarches Berachas HaTorah? And now he's coming and saying he's not giving a reason why Nashim make a bracha on Berachas HaTorah. He's giving a reason why Nashim only make one bracha on Berachas HaTorah, and not many. And that is because they have a chiyuv just like anybody else. That is not the full sikha, but it's the majority of the sikha. And what we did together is we really unpacked what the sikha is telling us, and the limmud that we learn about women, the limmud about tefillin, the limmud about tzitz, the limmud about Torah. May we be mekabel Torah, b'simcha, b'pnimius. I know that's a shvuas bracha, but still. And may we only have atzlacha in all the things that we do.